Today we've got with us entrepreneur Di Gilpin. Di is Chief Executive of Smart Green Shipping. Hello, Di. Thanks so much for joining us today. Now, you started your career in a mobile phone team, Cellnet, which was famed really for being the first mobile phones in the UK back in the mid 80s. Um, and then from cell phones to fuel cells, you went into motor racing and managed teams there, and then into yacht racing, another fast-paced environment. There must have been similarities between all three. I mean, it would be interesting to know how it all came about and what those similarities were.
Yeah, thanks, Harriet, and thanks so much for inviting me onto the podcast. It's a great honour to be here. Yeah, it's a kind of unconventional career. I was very fortunate to be recruited to work in the launch team for cellular telephones, Cellnet, and we were told at that point that nobody wanted to have a mobile phone. You know, we've got phones on our desks, so why would anyone want a mobile phone? But we could see the vision of what we were trying to achieve. And I think, you know, what I learned in those early days was that people are always tell you that you can't do stuff. And if you've got a clear enough vision, you can, if you know what you're doing and you know where you want to go. What was also interesting about the Cellnet days was that all of the big consultancies at the time looked at the technology and said this will only ever be a business to business product. And now we know that everybody has got, you know, mobile phones doing lots of different things for them. So there's social and there's business. And so I think there's a lesson there, which is that you can't foresee the future. Even the most expensive consultants in the world can't see what's going to happen because something will come out of the left field. So someone invented a bit of text and then it was like, oh, we can now do texting, and then and so it took off and exploded into a different world. When I was working for Cellnet, we were trying to talk to a business to business community, and we had very little marketing budget. And James Hunt's younger brother came to us and said, oh, you should sponsor me in motor racing. So we said, okay, well, we'll do that, because it was a really cool, and it was much more cost effective than buying. What you could do at the time was you could only buy a full page ad in the Sunday Times or a TV commercial, all of which were vastly expensive. We didn't have that budget. So we did this Formula 3 motor racing campaign, and it was hugely successful. And as a consequence of that, I started working in that sort of technology space. We put the first mobile phone connection into Damon Hill's racing helmet when he was racing, which we did with Cellnet. So it was like, that was the first time anyone had talked to a pit wall. And so, you know, everyone, oh, you can't do that. They're traveling at, 150 miles an hour, whatever it is. We can, if you kind of identify what the problem is. So it's the idea of being able to do something that is impossible or really hard, and you bring really good people together to do that. That really helps. So in my case, I was really fortunate to have then got invited to work in Formula One for the Benetton Formula One team and Ford Motor Company as a result of doing the Formula 3 sponsorship. And again, that was just so exciting that every fortnight, whatever happened, you had to get two really good cars onto the grid and you had to compete. And even if you weren't in the front three, you wanted to be better than you were the week before. And there was so many really good people working in that space, and it's tremendously exciting. But there was also, with a big sponsor like Ford, a lot of learning that was coming out of the racetrack and going into what Ford were doing with their road cars, how Ford were managing their factory teams and so on. So that was really good knowledge transfer. I was getting really interested in all of that. Then somebody said, why don't you, so we had a sponsor working on the Benetton team called Logica, and they started to sponsor a yacht race called the BT Global Challenge, and they asked if I would go and manage that for them. By this time, I had a child and thought, I'll slow down, I'll do yacht racing because that's slower and I'll be a good mum. Anyway, it didn't work out. I mean, I think I was a reasonable mum, but anyway, I went and worked in yacht racing, and the BT Global Challenge was really fascinating because Sir Che Blythe had developed it, and I think that it was called something like making the impossible possible, something like that. So what it did was that professional yacht racing skippers were supported by a team of 12 amateurs, people who had never raced a yacht before, and they raced around the world into the prevailing winds and currents. And at the time, more people had been to the moon than had done that. So it was just like extraordinary. So we brought together these people. There was like a doctor, a policeman, a ballet dancer, a physiotherapist. All of these people came together as a team, and they'd never sailed together before. So we put that team together. So I started to learn about how you build teams, how you motivate people. And then I went on to work with one of the UK's finest solo yacht racers, a guy called Mike Golding, who had won the BT Global Challenge and then was sailing solo around the world, which is the most mad thing to do. But whilst I'm in yacht racing, I'm going, right, so this is really interesting. Where's the knowledge transfer going? How are we selling this to, shipping? And everyone's like, no, not really. There's no demand for it. So about the same time, and it coincided with becoming a mum, I became aware of climate change and thought, well, what have I done in my life that I could transfer my knowledge and technology into, something that could help address the climate challenges that we were facing. And it was like, well, we've put wind on ships for millennia, so surely we can do that. And so I set up a business to do that in 2014. So that's the kind of very, very quick potted history of how I got here. So it's about people tell you things aren't possible, and they are. It's about knowledge and technology transfer, and just having a very clear view of what it is you want to do.
And it's tempting to potentially assume that you might be an engineer or something. But you left school when you were 16, is that right?
Yes, I did. So um, I was a daughter of a very conventional man of his time. So my dad didn't think it was worth investing in girls' education after they were 16 because they would only become mothers and housewives. And so he wasn't really prepared to support me. So I said, oh, I'm going to do it anyway. And then I started doing my A levels, and I just didn't really work hard enough. So it just caused a lot of shouting at home. So I said, that's it. I'm going to get a job. And off I went and got a job. So I worked in sales, selling soft drinks over the phone to people for Corona, and I did that for a couple of years. Then I I was working in the civil service, and I managed to get through evening classes, a qualification which enabled me to get to North London Poly as a mature student. I was mature at 21, where I did business and economic development. So I did I think it was called an HND in business studies, and then I did a postgraduate diploma in development economics, and I just loved it. And from there, I was able to get a job with Solnet.
And then, so back to what you said, 2014, 21st century sales for cargo vessels. This is what you're suddenly creating. I mean, you're motivated by the environment that was sort of coming to the forefront in that, well, it has been for a while, I suppose. And it still seems to me like a world apart from working for a company and managing a team. However exciting those jobs that you've mentioned sound, it still sounds really different. How did you get started? You come up with the idea and then what, you just register the company and get going? Did you have investment? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good question. So in 2009, a friend, a guy called David Surplus, who had set up a company called B9 Energy. And I were kind of riffing, as you do, over a pint about, he was a marine engineer and he had developed an onshore wind turbine company. So we were kind of going, well, you know, an onshore wind turbine is basically a windmill. So it's just like a different technology. It's using the same energy as wind, but we're just harnessing this wind in a new way. And so I'm saying, well, you know, we did all sorts of really cool things with really extraordinary naval architects in the BT Global Challenge and in Mike Golding's Round the World racing. And we knew that America's cup yachts have the capacity to sail faster than the wind. So that just messes with your head, really. But it's just, you know, technology is just amazing. So the problem is that shipping is a big emitter. So it's emitting about 3%, up to 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And with all of the events that are going on in the world, like, you know, the Ukraine invasion, about the, you know, the Red Sea, the Panama Canal has been suffering a drought. So the ships are not always able to use the most conventional short sea route. So their problem is getting bigger. So the fleet size is increasing and the routes that they are having to take are getting longer because of all of these black swan events, which means that the emissions from these ships is increasing in a very alarming way. So what can we do about that? Well, there's alternative fuels, they're being developed in the future, and that's great. But we need to do something now because what matters to the climate is the cumulative emissions. So we've got a budget which we can't exceed. So we can't keep kicking the can down the road. We have to do something now. And what we see is that wind assist is a really near to market solution. It's ready to go. And so we can start reducing emissions from ships now. And that it's a no regret solution, because if you're burning fossil fuels, you just burn less. If you transition to an alternative green fuel, they're all predicted to cost a great deal more money. So you're reducing the amount of fuel you use with wind assist, then it's a good thing to be doing now, both for your economics, but also for the environment.
And is it as simple as installing a sail on the ship?
No, so I mentioned David. So David and I were having this pint, and so we started to talk to the market, and there was just a big pushback, but there was no regulation. The shipping industry wasn't motivated to do anything. It's regulated through an international body called the International Maritime Organization. And there wasn't, some people liked the idea, but they just didn't have the motivation to do it. So the technology is not simple. The concept is simple, but there's quite a lot of complexity in delivering it. But there are a lot of commercial obstacles as well, which is, you know, if I rock up at your house, Harriet, and say, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this to your house. I'm going to drill some holes here, but it'll be much more efficient afterwards. You're going to go, oh, hang on a minute. Have you got insurance for that? Where's the, you know, what's the regulators say about it? What's the classification society say about it? What's the cost? All of those things. So we've had to deal with all of those issues. And the way that I've done that is through collaboration. So just talk to everybody, ask everybody what the problem is and how do we solve it. So the first people to ask were naval architects. So the naval architects that I work with on the BT Global Challenge, who are brilliant naval architects called Humphreys Yacht Design. You give them a problem, they will create a solution. It's not about we've created a solution and here's the problem. So I brought to them the shipping community, so ship owners and cargo owners and ports. And so we know hypothetically we can put wind on ships because we've been doing it for 6,000 years. But how do we put wind on today's ships that work in today's just-in-time delivery systems? Let us understand your challenges and then we'll design around them. And that's what we have done. But even when we've got, you know, all the sophisticated lab-based analyses of how much fuel was. People want to see it. They want to kick the tires. They want to be able to watch it work.
Mm.
So we have just completed the installation of our first test and demonstration rig at Hunterston in Scotland, to allow the market, ship owners, to come and have a look at it, ship crew to come and have a play with it, to overcome some of those very normal human fears that people experience. So,
And is that I saw a video on LinkedIn, is that the fast rig
yes,
installation?
that's
Right.
the fast rig, and it's been designed with the input of the ship owning community, and with the cargo owners, but it's also very, very lightweight, which means it can be relatively easily installed. And that's a key point, because if you own a ship and I say, oh, I need your ship to install, it's like, well, I need my ship to, that's how I make my money. So if I'm taking it out of service for multiple weeks to install the rig, even though you'll save some money in the longer term, it's going to cost you $15,000, $20,000 a day whilst it's sitting there doing nothing. So you're not keen on that. So we've accelerated that installation process. So we'd be through having a very lightweight material. It's also 100% recyclable. So we're looking at how we design in the circular economy. So the North Star is really, how do we minimize our environmental impact? But you're not going to do any of that if you don't develop a commercial project or commercial product, because no one's going to buy it if it's super, super efficient but costs cost a fortune. You're not going to buy it. So we have to balance those two pieces of technical brilliance and commercial desirability. Irresistibility is what I'm trying to create. And you do that through collaboration, and we collaborate with the most amazing people.
Mm. And just before we go on to that, I wondered, from an operational point of view, once the rig's in on the ship, is it easy to use? Can everyone just get on and go about their day as usual, shipping from A to B, or do they need to really concentrate on this great big sail that's installed?
No, so they're very it's excellent question, and one of the things that you're obviously becoming a ship owner in your head, aren't you? Because those are the
Yeah.
sorts of questions
How am
they
I going
ask
to handle this?
you. Exactly. So we would be installing multiple rigs on a ship over a short period of time, but the how do the crew manage it? So the rigs are intelligent, so they know which way the wind is coming from. They've got sensors on them, and they know there are upper and lower scales of winds in which they can operate. So if it's not windy, we retract them, we lay them down on the deck, because if it's not windy and you're using the engine to push this obstacle through the water, then you're using more energy. So that's not smart. If it's too windy and it's creating a safety risk, we bring it down, we can retract it. If we're coming in and out of port, retract. Using cargo, loading and discharging cargo, they're out of the way. And they know when they're going to be doing these things. It's kind of programmed into them. But when they're in ideal wind conditions, of which there's quite a wide range, they will go, well, I think the wind's coming, it's coming from over there. Oh, no, it's changed a bit. So if you can, that you see on LinkedIn and on YouTube that there are flaps. So the flaps operate. It's a bit like an aircraft wing, but standing up, and the flaps create as it were the shape of a sail, so they can capture the amount of wind that's depending on what wind direction and speed is coming at it.
So clever. It's almost like sensors meet AI.
It is, and it is. Some people call it AI. I'm a bit suspect about AI because everything is AI at the moment, but it's intelligent. So the naval architects are concerned. They do a rather lovely voiceover, in sort of probably like David Attenborough or Johnny Morris talking about animals. And the rig is going, oh, but the wind's coming from the northwest. I need to get out of the way, or I need to, whatever. Um, it's very straightforward technology. It's been developed in yacht racing. It's easy to manage. It's easy to install, and it means the crew have minimal. They don't have to learn how to be sailors again. I mean, there are some operational details, obviously, that they need to manage,
Mm.
but we're not asking them to be able to navigate by the stars or shin up a rig or any of the things that we would have seen on the clipper ships of yore.
Mm. So that it really is an assistant rather than an alteration.
Yeah, exactly. And it provides thrust. Sometimes people think we're providing some sort of energy that will be converted into electricity. It's not, it's providing direct thrust, so you don't have to use the engine so much.
Clever, so clever. And they look nice. Really nice design. Did you do that?
Yeah, no, so we have had a great good fortune of being supported by Scotland. Scottish Enterprise gave us a grant very early. Um, and I just would like to note that that was really helpful because as a woman in investment, only, about 2p in every pound gets invested in women-led companies. So to have the support of Scotland, a grant at an early stage was absolutely critical and enabled us to find a whole bunch of other really splendid, marvellous investors. But the Scottish Enterprise investment has meant that the project has been built in Scotland on the Clyde near Govan, which is a traditional shipbuilding region, used to be the lead the world in shipbuilding,
Mm.
and now it's a fairly rundown area. There's no jobs, so we got a local primary school. Went in to talk to them, local primary school, Lawn Street Primary School in Govan, and took two of my lovely colleagues did this, took our corporate colours and said to the year 7 children, right, okay, so told them a bit about the history of shipbuilding on the Clyde, told them about the future of green shipping and how we were hoping to revive the Clyde to do that, and said, right, think about the wind, think about the sea, and do some design for us. And so they came up with the visual using those colours and thoughts. We did run them through a professional graphic designer
Mhm.
at the end, but yeah, it's the kids who did it. And now those colleagues who did that work, Isla and Helena, are threatening to take these little kids to the site. I'm terrified of that. I mean, they're all going to look very cute in their helmets and their little high-vis jackets, but also it's very close to the sea, and it's like, oh,
Better
it's
pick a calm day.
yeah, and have lots of support around. But yeah, I think it's a recruitment pipeline,
Yeah,
really. Very early, start early.
absolutely. What an inspiring trip that'll be for them.
Yeah, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's great because there's huge amounts of activity that's going on in this space. And there is a real opportunity for Scotland and the UK more widely to, it's not only about us being entrepreneurs, it's about we need to develop a new economy. We need to develop new solutions. And it's a really big opportunity for new jobs, new technology, and to start these kids thinking about it early is really important.
Mm. Certainly going to be a great legacy. I mean, I think you're right. The economy around environmental innovation is surely the way to go. And certainly we see a lot of it in the lab industry. And this is a really fantastic example of how that translates into industry. And
Completely. And I think we all get kind of a bit hooked on the kind of politics of climate change. I mean, I think that's a bit weird personally, but what we are proposing is that you use less fuel that costs, so it'll cost you less money. So it's not that, but a happy byproduct is that uses, it emits
mm,
fewer toxic noxious gases into the atmosphere, but it's
mm,
just better business.
yeah.
And so why wouldn't you do that? And I think that we see a lot of that um, green technology being, portrayed as some sort of lentil eating knitting things, and it's just there's a new world coming, and the smart money knows where it's coming from, and so we're just getting on with it.
Mm. And it's so good that you are because, with everything, it takes time. I think when you look at how we store music now, for example, we went through the CD phase and the mini disc phase, and probably a few others in the meantime, and now we're in the cloud. I bet when mini discs came around, people thought, yes, this is it, and other people said, no, it isn't. It's just a part of the journey.
Completely that. And so when we launched the Fast Rig, which we did on April 17th, beautiful sunny day, which was delightful because we hadn't had one up until then in the west coast of Scotland, but we had this gorgeous sunny day. And it was really described as the end of the beginning, because now we've got this, the naval architects were there, the first time they'd seen it in real life. They're going, oh, we could change this and we could do this. So there's another iteration already being formed in people's minds.
Mm.
And the moment we get it out there, and we'll be installing this Fast Rig onto a ship in September of this year, and then doing
Gosh.
sea trials for a few weeks. We'll get the input from the crew. We'll get the input from the engineers who are installing the rigs on the ships and all that stuff. The design will change. Once we
Mm.
get it out into the market, somebody will come along and go, I know what we can do to improve that. And that's great, because it's like, a positive arms race. We just start getting better and better and better. And that reflects on what we did in Formula One. There was lots of, just watching what other people would do. And it's like, oh, we can just tweak that a bit. We can do this bit, we can do something with the front wing end plate. That mentality just helps everybody.
Mm.
And it drives competition. The competition drives better product.
Mm. It
And that's
reminds me, you're right, actually, competition, I don't want to miss that point. Competition does drive better product. You're absolutely right. And it reminds me of that, I can't remember his name. He did it with the cycling team, the science of marginal gains. Tiny tweaks, tiny, tiny tweaks to improve the overall performance.
yes, exactly. And so what we're doing now, from where we are now with the first design, the demonstration is a big step change. We're going to go from a baseline of, saving no savings to saving up to 30% with a wing sail, or with a suite of wing sails
Wow.
installed on your ship. The next iteration might go another 5%, might, if we're really lucky, go another 10%. We've made the big leap, but then we've got to keep making more and more leaps. So what we're designing now is for a retrofit.
Mm-hmm.
As we're working on a parallel path, we're thinking about new builds. So the ships that we'll be installing on are not optimized for using wind. They're optimized for using big, heavy engines, which very cheap fuel gets put, and you just push this brick across the ocean. What we're doing is saying, right, okay, well, we'll just do that. We'll make the best of that part of the market. But when you want to build a new ship, come and talk to us, because we can optimize the hull, the rudder, the performance to get more out of the wind. So
Mm.
then you might be seeing 50%, 60% of the power coming from the wind. Then you start to think about other changes in the way the system works, and it gets to be really interesting stuff after that.
Mm. You've been very ground-based and sea-based, but I wonder if you'll ever make a leap, as it were, into aviation.
So some of the work that we do on the weather routing side has been funded by the European Space Agency. So looking at using satellite data to be able to look at the historical weather data for any ship on any route,
Mm-hmm.
and say, okay, so if you run your ship on that route, then we can expect you'll get this much fuel saving if you put this number of rigs on the ship. So we can do that big maths. We're also going to be using satellite weather forecast data to say, so most ships go the shortest route from A to B, but if you start to look at that route using science, you can say, right, go a little bit north or west or whatever it is, you'll pick up a better wind and you'll still arrive at the same time. So we've got this perpetual computing mind going on, choosing the route, and that will save you even more. So that is using aerospace technologies and satellite data.
Mm.
And, so it's just really interesting if you look around what's going on in the world. And so I'm a bit of a magpie. It's like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if we could transfer that into this space. I was having lunch with a guy who's a farmer who's doing regenerative agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a farmer. He doesn't really have time to be trading carbon. So they needed somebody to aggregate that. And I'm thinking, well, ship owners don't have enough time to deal with all of the paperwork of, emissions trading schemes and all of that. So can we do that for them? So it's, just keeping awareness of the goal, reduce emissions, but the tools are not necessarily what everybody's used to using.
Mm. I love how efficient you've been. You've really brought everything you've done all together and really forged a new route with it. It's quite inspiring. I'm very, very in awe. You can be very in awe. I am in awe of what you're doing. I think it's wonderful.
Well, it's
Um,
great of you to say so. I mean, it's a bit of a journey, and we've had some very, difficult times along the way.
hmm,
But I have to say that I've been supported by great people, family, friends, and all the people who have contributed to the project. Everyone has, we've called it a coalition of the willing, and everybody has made a difference.
hmm. Coalition of the
Right.
Willing. Very good. So, um, if you could change one thing, and I honestly, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm kind of intrigued. Um, if you could change one thing about the future of scientific research, what would it be?
I think what I would like to see is more. uh, so I have. I'm not going to answer this directly because obviously that's the way that I am thinking about it. But we think we are the cleverest of species. But if we look at non-human, there's a lot of cleverness in that, in those species. So if you look at the way that fulmars, for example, who are seabirds, they can operate at force 8, force 9. They're very, very happy when they're operating at high wind speeds. And that enables them to fly 9,000 miles, get their lunch, get back with a net calorie gain because they're so adapted for operating at those very high wind speeds. We, as a species, go, oh, God, that's a bit high. So let's get everything out of the way. And so I think we've got so much to learn from nature. So we've got so much to learn from other species, from the way that there's collaboration. So I think that being, I think science and nature are blending more
Mm,
now. And I think we need to keep doing that. I think nature has just such an extraordinary wisdom that we tend to, as a species, be a bit arrogant about from time to time.
mm,
So, yeah, I think that's it. I think it's about being open to the wisdom of the world.
mm. That's interesting. So the responsibility is on us to look under our noses, to feel educated and inspired.
I think so, and I think there's a role for art as well. I mean, we kind of we put all these things into silos, but when we're designing the wings for our ships, they are beautiful, and we want to put some artwork that kids did on them. And so I think there's room for using science to understand how the world works. And when we start to look at how the wind works, there's some beautiful patterns and rhythms in all of that, which I think sometimes scientists will get a bit, or some of the scientists that I've met, should I say, I don't know all of them in the world, but some, just to be open to beauty as well. There's some magic in science
Mm.
and beauty.
I think that's a lovely thought to end this on. Di, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure hearing about everything you've done. I'm so glad you could come and talk to us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute privilege.